So parental alienation is a problem that sometimes arises when people get divorced or separated, or sometimes actually when moms and dads are still together. But what happens is there's conflict between the parents, and the child is caught in the middle, and after a while one parent may start bad-mouthing or denigrating or criticizing the second parent. And if that happens sufficiently, the child doesn't want to be caught in the middle. The child moves to one side. The child adopts the same side as the parent who's doing the criticizing, and rejects a relationship with the second parent. And so basically, the child is rejecting a relationship without a good reason, because the second parent is a normal, concerned, good parent, and the child rejects that parent simply because the first parent has been bad-mouthing the second parent incessantly. Parental alienation wasn't called parental alienation, but the phenomenon has been described for centuries. But the actual name came about. The name parental alienation came about in 1985 in an article written by a child psychiatrist named Richard Gardner. And so he defined the concept more clearly, and he helped to define that everybody had a role to some extent. The alienating parent is engaging in this campaign to criticize the target parent. The target parent sometimes reacts in ways that might not be helpful, but the target parent doesn't cause this to happen. The alienating parent is the person who causes it. And the child has a role, because the child participates in some way in gravitating to one parent and ignoring the other parent. They know that there are people in different countries who might use parental alienation as a diagnosis. In other words, they know that there are many people who are concerned about parental alienation, and they might actually use that in a record as a diagnosis. And so the ICD needs a way to recognize that. And if it is used in a record as a diagnosis, they give instructions. In other words, the instruction is, you go to their website, you enter parental alienation, and up pops the diagnosis that they want you to use. I think there are some good ideas of how to reduce the occurrence of parental alienation. You know, I don't think it's ever going to totally go away, because it is a malicious activity, and there are malicious people who do things. It's a little bit like bank robbery. You know, no matter what you do, there's still going to be bank robbery. But there are some good ideas. So there's a lot of interest in what's called shared parenting, and that improves the child's relationship with both parents. And it seems to be very helpful, even if the parents say, we don't get along. There's another movement that is somewhat underway in the United States, which has to do with the way family court operates. Official name is structured family mediation. And it's been proposed that that be the way that family disputes get solved. In other words, not second or third, but first, that would be the default, the first step. So that would be a really, really big step. There's another step, which is that attorneys and judges and psychologists and social workers need to be trained to be aware of this problem. And what we want them to do is we want them to recognize it early, when it's mild or moderate. You know, there are different stages: mild, moderate, severe. And we want, if the child is in counseling with somebody, or the parent is seeing somebody as a therapist, we want that therapist to recognize parental alienation when it is first starting, because then it's more treatable, it's more fixable. So that would be great. That involves training in graduate schools, training for attorneys, training for psychologists who are still studying. I guess there's another approach, which is how do we approach children whose moms and dads are getting divorced? And this can be done by school counselors, by therapists, by friends, by clergy who know the family. And there's a fairly simple message to the child, which is stay out of it. Stay out of the fighting. If mom and dad are arguing, either ignore it or go to a different room, but stay out of it. If your mom or your dad tries to talk you into something or to do something about the other parent, just somehow try as best you can to stay out of whatever it is that they're disagreeing about. Now, I realize that's not always going to work, and children are not powerful enough sometimes to always stay out of it. But that is the advice that I think should be given to children in situations like this. It's unclear whether these people are treatable. In other words, a lot of these people have personality disorders that might be very, very difficult to treat. But you don't want the child's welfare to get hung up in the issues of this malicious parent. And so the court does have to take steps that if severe parental alienation has occurred, our position is that that is child abuse. And the child should be removed from that household. And almost always simply go to the other parent, the victim parent or the targeted parent. And so then, I think a good therapist can work with the preferred parent or the parent with the personality disorder, and you can try to see if that person can make some progress. So with a person with borderline personality disorder, you know, there are good therapists who help the person go back and try to understand how they came to have this particular personality issue. And sometimes, you know, some of these people are reachable. I think the situations when parental alienation occurs in a family, I think the situations are just tragic. They're very painful for everybody that the poor child is caught in the middle and ends up in this horrible situation of feeling that he has to choose. The parent that's being rejected is typically a perfectly capable, loving parent who is going through this horrible situation. The parent that's causing it to happen, at least for a while, seems to be in control, but really isn't, because ultimately that parent's going to lose out also. So I hope that we can learn how to deal with it, where it comes from, how to identify it, what to do about it in court, what to do about it in therapy. I mean, I think we're headed in the right direction, but we have work to do.